6 months after deploying artificial intelligence, something strange starts happening inside companies. Not immediately. At first, everything looks like a success. Processes get faster, costs go down, teams report fewer issues. If you look at the numbers, it looks like the project worked. But inside the company, something starts to shift. People begin doing work that was never part of the plan. Small tasks, extra checks, manual corrections. Nobody reports it, because technically, the artificial intelligence is still working. And that's exactly where the problem starts. Because by the time leadership notices something is off, they're already months behind reality. Have you seen this happen? Where everything looks fine on paper, but the people inside the process know it isn't? This is the part of artificial intelligence adoption nobody prepares for, and it almost always shows up around the 6-month mark. This is an artificial intelligence clone, by the way, on purpose, because this is exactly how we use artificial intelligence inside our own work. I run a company called Data Wonder. We build artificial intelligence systems for insurance companies, accounting firms, and medical clinics. So this isn't theoretical. This pattern shows up again and again. If you're trying to understand what actually happens inside companies after artificial intelligence gets deployed, you can subscribe. Now, here's what most companies think is happening. They deploy artificial intelligence. They measure the first results, and they assume those results will continue. That's the model. Short-term gain, long-term improvement. But that's not what actually happens. Because the first 90 days are misleading. In the beginning, you get what looks like clean efficiency. A process that used to take an hour now takes 15 minutes. A team that needed 3 people now needs 1. Those gains are real, but something else is happening at the same time. Quietly. People start adapting around the artificial intelligence. Not because they're told to, but because they have to. They notice where the system breaks, where it misclassifies something, where it needs cleaner input than expected. And instead of escalating those issues, they fix them themselves. Small adjustments, workarounds, extra steps that weren't part of the design. Does that sound familiar? Because this is where the 6-month problem begins. By the time you hit month 4, 5, 6, 2 things are happening at the same time. The obvious gains have plateaued. The system is doing what it was supposed to do. Nothing improves anymore, it just stabilizes. But underneath that, the hidden work has been compounding. All those small fixes, all those manual corrections, all those temporary adjustments, they've become permanent. And nobody has mapped them. Let me give you a concrete example. In one insurance company we worked with, the artificial intelligence system handled document intake and classification. At first, it worked well. Processing time dropped significantly. Everything looked like a success. But a few months in, the team started pre-sorting documents before sending them to the artificial intelligence, because they had learned through experience that certain formats caused errors. They didn't report it, they just adapted. So the artificial intelligence kept performing well, but only because the humans were quietly doing extra work upstream. When we actually mapped the process, the real efficiency gain was about 60% of what was being reported. Not because the artificial intelligence failed, but because the system around it changed. If this is useful so far, just hit like. It helps more people see it. Now, that example is just the surface, because the real issue isn't the extra work. It's what happens to attention inside the company. And this is where most companies completely miscalculate what artificial intelligence actually does. Because the assumption is simple. If artificial intelligence saves time, people will use that time for higher value work. That's the justification behind almost every artificial intelligence business case. But that's not what usually happens. Freed up time doesn't automatically become valuable time. It flows somewhere, and most of the time, it flows to the path of least resistance. More meetings, more internal discussions, more low-impact decisions, while at the same time, the artificial intelligence is running processes that fewer people are actually watching. And this is where things start to break slowly. Here's the part that almost nobody sees coming. When humans step back from a process, they also step back from its feedback loop. Before artificial intelligence, errors were visible. Someone made a mistake, someone fixed it, someone learned from it. After artificial intelligence, that loop changes. Errors don't always get seen because the people who used to catch them are no longer in that part of the process. So the system keeps running, and small errors accumulate. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create drift. We've seen this in accounting firms. Automated reconciliation systems producing small inconsistencies that went unnoticed for months, until someone had to manually fix everything. We've seen it in clinics, scheduling systems optimizing for efficiency while quietly reducing actual patient interaction time. Same system, different outcome than expected. And here's where the 6-month moment becomes critical. Because this is usually when leadership starts asking, why aren't we seeing more improvement? Or worse, why does this feel harder than before? And that's when the conclusion gets made. The artificial intelligence didn't deliver. But that's not what happened. The real failure happened earlier. No clear ownership of the output, no structure for oversight, no plan for what people should do with freed up time. So the system drifted, slowly, quietly, until the gap became visible. And here's the second-order effect that matters. When this happens once, companies become more cautious with artificial intelligence. When it happens twice, they lose confidence completely. Not in a loud way, just enough to slow everything down. And that's how companies fall behind. Not because they didn't adopt artificial intelligence, but because they adopted it without structure. The companies that get this right do something differently. Before deployment, they define ownership, not just of the system, but of the output. They actively map what people start doing around the artificial intelligence. Not after 6 months, but in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And they decide explicitly where freed up time should go. Not in theory, but in actual tasks and responsibilities. Because what actually happens 6 months after artificial intelligence adoption is not a technology problem. It's a visibility problem. If you can't see how the system is really operating, you can't improve it. And most companies are operating with less visibility than they think. If what I described sounds familiar, the plateau, the hidden work, the lack of oversight, and you want to fix that properly inside your company, you can book a free call with me. The link is right below this video.